Good morning, again. Katrina. And thank you for joining us, everyone online. We'll begin with some prayers, which you can find a link to in the chat box. To the teacher and now transcendent destroyer, the one that's gone before the destroyer, completely and fully awakened one, perfect in knowledge and good conduct, one God of bliss, nor of the world's supreme guide to beings to be tamed. Teacher of gods and humans, to you, the Buddha and now transcendent destroyer, the glorious conqueror, Shakyamuni, I prostrate, make offerings, and go for refuge. When a supreme among humans you are born on this earth, you pay 7 strides and said, I am supreme in this world. To you who are wise, then I bow. With pure bodies formed supremely fine, wisdom ocean like a golden mountain. Fame that blazes in the 3 worlds, winner of the best supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like a spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the 3 worlds are not, incomparable wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as an ocean, to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, freeing from attachment, through virtue, freeing from the lower realms. Unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path to freedom too, well established in the trainings. The holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform only perfect virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely, this is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, a mirage, a flame of a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble. A dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all seeing to view the four faults, and be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, Foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Oh yeah.
Peace on game.
Oh yeah. Go. Or yonder range mambu tsonga shin, serab yishi also tagbeko. Sergin dogshin ladan mechuba, chum de la chasalo. Oh yeah. Tati arwanga ranch kasure. Oh yeah. Seditsa maimba, kyachima. Ngondo ladan me koba. Kebarjashi, tobarchasro. Techedo. Nishanlia, Sawabamba. Mesongi Tungeleta, Sadami Kobatabji Chido, Shala Sawabamba. Donna Chuni Metsewa Tishinshikba Namji Sonsidwa. So Dushana Sawabamba said na Dudu Yara. Sawabamba and Pemba Trubate Yugorqua. Pemba Trubunako Sawabanga Yordo. Sachi Chuchina Dudu Gerche Yore. Donna Chuni Metsewa Tishu Namji Sons. Tatandangazo, one day. Ngondo lada me koba tabje che soapa ne chineji pemba trubati chago yo so ngara so kibu chongwina tene nibade ngele ge chusura 동해 탐절 코에 동해를 타르 che ngele ge che tene tarwa tobe chedo 동니 양에 대바데세 다음에 바꾸면 가서 다 좋네 동반이 참으성을 당고래도 Timena nganga samsa sosumatu samgi bangege samluti samsari samlukona to sindigira rajanjamatu samlumako ge chang chinde samlu shukshibstu timadu samsa chinde samkotu ne diora tuni nyangen debades dongbani sanga se ke cheshu suchi de medra ke cheshu chi yo samsa de norre sam te kyo kanga yungo re samdan digira Chuna danga su tongji mabu she sarwa nga se ate phungbula tene pha takpa samado sosu namju samba na she nga rawa ate me sam ane nga yi se ge rawa pe shukshibu su nga de nyamdo charne shukshibu zinye chwara o tiya ko shenja kiwe yu ma to tinde she me sam sa che o da me ba ta mita pala soba tanda ko chagda kondo da nga je da chado da drensim da Nesim la soba tezo nyamo chini ki paya. Daksho da shenjo serara. Mazo konzo chulu da miri da lungba da tindishone. Daksho da shenjo da chagda paya. Rangjo la chagwa shenjo la dawa. Tipang becho de tarba to becho de doa. Nele ki chore doa, neba legba. Koe legba richini koe junro kichira. Tarba topsuna ngeba legba sen jura mebe ane tarba toguyora tongele larya dokba mebe tarba toguyora ngele ge chö sigdo te ranchibu ane koe dongele tarwe samlutana marab re samje ro range chende chebe simje chama tamje randa drawa menge chi yo mare phama la sokbe ro shya simje chama tamje ane Randa Drava, Tevandola Tunga Medeva Chahare Teora. Sosuna Shikanga Samliora, Teva Dola Tunga Medu, Tunga Machuna Samdiora. O Ti do Randa, Tevandola Tunga Medeva Sumba Himbe. Shalia Nekasur Range, Teva Trubashin to Shala Chini with Tevayon Tapshi. Tunga Mayo Tapshi Cheko Resam, Sumba Resam. Tata Shendo Yabane Tabuji to Bedecom. Tetan Tunganya Bena Tamjeta so Chas. Kibuchimbe Samlute Gora. Toma Mebana Ra, Koya Tungel Genarwa. Maobana to Stangit and Masun at Tarwatoba Chagosam. The Randa Dravasinja Shenda Sama Tamjeja. And Tawandula Tunga Medobaranda Suba Imbe. Tezusama Tamjea. Tungeda Tawata, Tawal Tarbetawal and go to Bachaco, Samluta. Tati Tanda Ranga Chetukumare. Tanda Ranga Chiniji, Shala Soapa Pemba Trubere Mato, Tarshimbe Kone, Shendin Trube, never Yonsu Zogbe Kone, Shala Pemba Trubeta, tene tsawa pangbe kone pemba chubete yungu mardo. Tele sanje ji koban tabu, rang kyun kunse yunde kunde. Tabdan shirab niga yonsu tarshimba yenge. Tendre kansa shin yura chaguyo samton, dona sanje ji koban tabu chaguyo sara. Sambu tarshi, yunde tarshimba, langdur ki yunde tarshimba. O niba yonsu zogba. Niba yonsu zogba kone simjen ki ten chubtum genge, sanje ji koban chi chine ki tobar cha asam. Yun ringbo samlo tang. Soso de yun ringbo de samlo tang gura. Sen de kyanjan de de mar de kyun tu che de yordam kiwa chima de chima. O tene mi kyang sing se ta ringbo samlo tang. Lo kya ke se. Lo be tabdan shirab ki chamambu lo lup gen sam gura. Tanda lup tuk mene. Rimji nga loba cha gen sam. O tende loba lo tende sanje ji koban chi chile ki tobar cha. De che do. Ane chu nyingi yu sam ngon du chu da. Nyele ki chu. Rawa sanje ji koban toba la soba. O tezu chu sanje ki soba de nyene. Tela toba che chini ki samlo ta. Ane yang chini ki nyamsu langi yin sam. O teni chanju ki sim mada chuma chunja se tamne sembar shu siya. O dili.
Yes. So here, to begin with, we should not be thinking just about this life, but rather in order to gain a good, sort of fully qualified rebirth in the future as a human or a god, wherein we are able to continue to practice the Dharma, at the very least, we should abandon harming others. And contained within that is the kind of want to benefit them as well. As it is said, the Buddha has sort of summarized the Dharma, the Tathagata has summarized the Dharma into non-harm. So however much we can, we should abandon harming others. We should give that up and instead try to, as much as we are able to, strive to benefit other sentient beings with the goal of not being born in the lower realms and instead gaining a good rebirth. But thinking beyond that, there is the Dharma of what we call definite goodness, thinking about not just gaining a good rebirth, but getting out of that cycle altogether, looking at the kind of meaning of emptiness and selflessness, thinking about this thought of I, that leads us, by grasping at that strongly, to then engage in all sorts of other afflictions. And so in order to avert that, in order to get rid of that, we need to train in emptiness that will bring about the state of nirvana, thinking that we are mistaken in this thought of I, and the way that we perceive it as something that is like autonomous, independent, wherein it is really something that is just designated on the basis of the aggregates. We don't hold it to exist in that way, but instead hold it as though this I were autonomous, and the mine then becomes an object of our craving. And so as much as we are able to counteract that through thinking about emptiness and thinking about subtle selflessness, we are able to then get rid of these thoughts of us and them, whether it's based upon sort of our lineage or our religion or whatever it may be, and all of the kinds of afflictions that arise from that, like pride and jealousy and anger and attachment and competitiveness and so forth. And so those kinds of dharmas, those activities that pursue liberation or that lead to liberation, are those that will eliminate our suffering. We will no longer have to continue to suffer in this cycle of samsara. But thinking then that it's not right to just pursue our own liberation, because when we look around, all of these other sentient beings are connected to us. They have acted as our kind mothers and fathers. And so to strive for our own liberation alone is really not suitable. And we also recognize that these beings as well are equal in wanting to have happiness and not wanting to have to suffer. They are just the same as us in that way. And so we then, looking at these other sentient beings, develop this wish to be able to achieve their happiness and eliminate their suffering. It's not appropriate for us to just strive for our own benefit. And so this thought of only ourselves is sort of given up, recognizing that all of these beings are in the same kind of situation. And though right now we don't have the ability to eliminate all of their sufferings and place them in that highest happiness, because we haven't sort of completed all of the sort of perfection imperfections. We haven't perfected the method and wisdom, the ability and gained that state for ourselves, the state of Buddhahood in which we have eliminated all faults, cultivated all good qualities, know all of the points to be adopted and abandoned, and have fully sort of brought our abilities to their culmination. So with that kind of attitude, we think that, well, I want to strive for that state of Buddhahood, wherein I have the fullest ability to benefit these suffering sentient beings. And this requires us to think long term, thinking about taking life after life after life, striving in this pursuit of accumulating, developing our method and wisdom in order to be able to attain that state of Buddhahood and benefit all sentient beings. And so here we should set a kind of motivation, thinking that we're engaging in the Dharma, listening to these teachings, not just thinking about sort of higher rebirths or even definite goodness, but beyond that, wanting to attain the state of perfect, complete enlightenment, of Buddhahood, in order to be able to benefit all sentient beings. And so for that purpose, I'm going to listen to these teachings. And in this way, we should set a proper motivation for hearing the Dharma.
Oh, yeah. 당한 주 참대 봐. 따와 추추셔야 되나 봐. 따와 추추셔야 돼. 당한 주 가서 소수다 붙이기 따와 동반 얘기 따와를 서버 저거나 뒤컨데 저거를 해서 티셔요도. 람단 데뷔 남샤 미축 봤어. 람냠솔라니야 타르바 토비아다네 텐데 ten이 가서 지나 세거도. 람단 데뷔 남샤 미축 봤어. 시 따와 딸은 백줄라 라레베스. 담보 시 따와 삼로 땅사가 시데. 아니 딸은 베베데 노르스나 아니 제마 람 코메타 텔레테니 제부 요에테 노르제 양다고 시키고 말도. 어제도 람다 데뷔 남샤데 미축베시도 세거라. 람 냠솔랑데 냠솔랑제데 냠솔랑베 제부데 아니 양다고 마노르에 제도세. 니 시 따와 딸라 백줄라 라레베 단다 아니 케시 삼로 땅사가 시지와라. 디제 탐제 메다바세르 사제 탐제 동에와세 최 탐제 동시 다음에 바세르 양엘에 대바 시시게 와세르 전다고 검제위 시작의 내주 알아주 통주 컨디시와래 시작의 내주 뭐부주 내주 원에도 컨디시래 디마노아지 야보지 신구요도 단당 알아주 소소를 따다 컨디래 뭐부 신다를 따다 컨디신도 디 노르데바 카르카르레로 티 노르데바 투파 메우스야 전달 시 내주 원에도 신바치네 시 따와데 마노아지 야보초네 삼로 따서데 마노르도 그 마노에네 랑게 주지 녀몬발라 소바 삼로 논주도 렘지렘지 도도요도 티인데 담부시 따와 삼로 따서가 시데 마노아체데 계셔버려서도 시 따와 딸람 베줄라라레베 따와 딸람 베줄데 동반이 따와 딸람 베줄네 동바다 텐젤라 테네 치기치레 테네 지슈라 예바니답시베 따와 딸람 딸람 밥도자 따와 딸람 베줄네 동바서 랑외네 동바다 텐진 데버르 조와서 팅니니데 텐제데 야보 삼르타네 동바데려 코아라바체 동바세데 삼르타도네 텐젤라 소 코아라바체 텐제 코라게 텐진 데버르 조에 네다데 원네 카리버데 테셰고요도 티인도네 갈수다 따와 딸람 베줄네 동바다 텐제 라 펜즈 지기 직슈라 네바니답시바예세 텐제 삼르타네 동발이야 네바 니시 니토바 과야고라토라 동바 삼르타디서 다 동바레 가게 메두 삼삼마이바 텐진 데버르 조아 자와체네게 텐진 데버르 조아 뚜두기치 여바 텐데니데 펜주 삼르타네 동바 셰쿠레스고르도 동바스도 동장지 삼르타네 자시 네베 텐제도서 강가 매버체네 체다 롱게스도 차고르도 지슈라 테네카세 네바니답시바테 니셰니답 소소하고 야우치 제발라 소바테데 신토바 체고레스고르도 아니 네바니답시바데 라세 뭐마와 남제스 어테줄람이야
No. So then as for where we had left off in the text, we're on page 18 of the English, beginning with how to seek the view. So for us individually, how we should pursue our understanding of the view of emptiness. Here, it begins by saying, an unmistaken exposition of the path and its resultant states depends on how you ascertain the philosophical view of phenomena. So in order to come to an understanding of the view, we need to have an understanding of sort of the foundation of things, how it is that we normally perceive objects of knowledge and how we are mistaken with respect to those objects of knowledge. And so it is then based upon having an understanding of the ground, like, for example, the way the Buddha taught that all all composite phenomena are impermanent, all contaminated phenomena are suffering, everything is selfless and empty, and nirvana is peace. We need to have an understanding of these things, particularly, again, how it is that we normally see things and how it is that we are mistaken with respect to those. How then do we overcome that kind of mistaken mindset that leads to all of our various afflictions? How do we do this within our own continuum, eliminate those kinds of mistaken minds? So here, this is dependent, again, upon having the proper sort of foundation of a philosophical view of phenomena that leads to an unmistaken understanding of the paths, how we pursue a particular resultant state. And so then it says, the method of ascertaining the view must be able to determine that dependent arising and emptiness complement one another. And so here, when it comes to the kind of understanding of emptiness, this is complementary to the understanding of dependent origination or dependent arising, such that because phenomena are empty of existing from their own side or in their own right, they are therefore dependently originated. And so here, it's not that one thinks that because phenomena are empty, they're totally non-existent, but rather by thinking about emptiness, by understanding emptiness properly, that leads to the understanding of dependent origination. And so too, by contemplating dependent origination, one comes to strengthen the certainty one has in emptiness. So by understanding, like thinking about emptiness in terms of emptiness from that sort of emptiness of that kind of autonomous existence, brings about certainty in this sort of contingent establishment in the way that things are dependently originated. Again, if one thinks emptiness and sort of thinks that that means nothingness, you fall into this kind of nihilistic extreme, whereas a proper understanding is such that these two, dependent arising and emptiness, complement each other, reinforce this sort of certainty in one another.
Oh yeah, the Karsore. And Delhi Shedu Tombani Shet and the Kadu Shero. Chidang and Samlutan, Baja Samlutan Rishina, Tambu Mitaba to Samlutan Yawihodo. Kishir Mitale Tunges Jera Tungel and Tamisos Mitaba da Tungewa. The Samlutan and the Tami Samlutana, Kwaya Yungordo. Oh, Pina Susudavchina ko Mitaba Yedi, Ranga Kivis, Tenji Rebarijuan Bishisra. Juda Mambula Tenet and Jungiuza. Kokeji Keji and Jura Dungish. Juda Kenji Wanga Kokeji Keji Ranking or Trumni, Netum Geshimato Chigi, Rawando Cheneshi, Umardo, Metabat Dina, Rawando Neshi, Omardo, Juda Kengi Shukam Neko Yordo. Yenduko, Tambu Metaba Tene Ranga Migwish Metasi, Metaba Juda Ken Tene Keneko, Kura Kadu Kadu Kuyinwagia, Lurtuya, Trubi Dengerang or Netum Gishayora. Oh, Metaba in the Rangakish. Tandanga Jukasura. Sunday Ta Suda, Sawan Zimba, Tawan Zimba, Tapan Zimba, and the Tadu Zimbase. Tapan Zimba, Metaba the Congo or the Tambo, Metaba Samta. Let's on the Ta. Someone said they call such a Yellow Pumbula Soba. He go I give a she, but the late Miss Our Segua. Marazo was Ludi Chashin Chesak Shirachi Gigora. Shenja Chesak Shiroche. That is when they look at the past Samutandi, Tanda Nebe Sogitansia, but at the Samutandi, some joy retirate ordo. Ye joy give a shilia. Many Garsoda, Misawa said to Lequayore. Tachidango Sherry Duce Pumbo, and then Nadachi Misawa Sama Jungus Tendreco Mayordo, about the Karin and Rigore. Sang Devas, Tungiver Shiri Dangazu, Teven Junior, which is some Giordo. Shenja give a Shirichimari, ye go give a Shirichiri, Dangazu Shenja Giordo. Sang te da and it is on that dozens and by rounds and bus. Oh, tis a chuneta pajama samlutana, Yaga Yogordo. You ditch sooner.
Mm. So here we're sort of approaching emptiness directly. It's jumping into that understanding of emptiness, but really contemplating in stages with respect to the various sort of characteristics of the truth of suffering, for example, is something that is very beneficial. To go from contemplating impermanence into contemplating the suffering nature of things, and then into selflessness and emptiness. This proceeding in this way actually like enhances one's understanding. So looking at things as being impermanent in that they arise from many causes and conditions. They don't have the ability to abide autonomously or like from their own side because they are under the control of various causes and conditions. They are occasional. They can't sort of remain by their own power, again, because they are under the control of various causes and conditions. And so that sort of understanding of impermanence helps us to enhance this kind of understanding of what it means for things to lack that sort of autonomy. And so again, we grasp at things that are really impure as being pure. We grasp at things as pleasurable that are really in the nature of suffering. We grasp at things as permanent that are really impermanent. And we grasp at things as having a self that are really selfless. So here, when it comes to that kind of misapprehension, again, we've covered sort of grasping at things that are impermanent as permanent. But when we hold things that are really impure as being pure, it's like these contaminated aggregates that we have taken up. We don't, as we should, view them as a sort of source of revulsion, but rather we view them as a source of happiness, as a source of pleasure, something that is pure or that leads to sort of good results. But really, when we investigate, when we look at their nature, there's something that should give rise to a kind of disillusionment or kind of revulsion. These are all within the nature of suffering. These are not things that we should be sort of clinging to or craving for, but we do out of these kinds of misapprehensions that we have. So here, again, we looking then at sort of the way in which we grasp at things, moving on to holding them to have some sort of a self. This is the idea that things have some sort of autonomy or some kind of existence in and of themselves. And it is by proceeding in this way through the various sorts of points that we can really, once we arrive at that understanding of emptiness, it will be much more sort of certain here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that and that so there. So Luda Simye, Pezu Chichil Danger Negiono, Lugi Simge Dan Checo Negiora. Luda Simye drama Chipset Teatele, Sauce, Sumbuchi Tegiora. Did they had a good again Mambuchil when you led a tag again Mambo Saju Melongi Joda, Mambuchil Togo, thing as a Hako Degua. Nanga Sosu Yala Soba, then Nagata, Ningda, Lord, Chibet, Legacy Mambo Shochiora. Tezuganga Legacy Gotoa. And then when you led a tag again, she Saya Toye, Long that she dream and did that she church at Nayadua. Did you do Tagur of churches, get some Lutayas Medua? Go Sumbuja Ted, Kujimambuja, ten Lubur to Yadu, San, some corner, and the social shed that Taguchi, Rawan, your hand ever so tear you are Rosa. Oh, Tende Salumeda by the Samtangora. Oh, Tenet Tungawa said, when you learn you shall watch it, Tanda Kega Nachila Sobara, Kasingazula Imba. Name about Lanzuta, Jorbata, Sota Tozo, Shenjara Kiwer, the Tin Jurche, Metabare, the Tadilla, Gubere Yordo, Name Beta Naguare, Lanzuta de Ganguacha, Sumbeta, Chiwacha, to the Samutadi, Koyan Yilikoke, Shirachidua. Oh, Tidu to the Medaba, the Tunga, Tezu Samutana, 깨지 집에 텐데 삼고나 될 라오에 다서 차고로 쉐부치 대다다 만들어지 용에 매버데 롭스 쳐테기도 와 뒤선자 가르쳐라 뭐 텐데 삼로 따지고 다데 라오에 텐데 매버다 텐데 삼로 땅거라 나이나야 류다트죠 동해계에 시청에 13을 따네 류라 가르쳐오래 소외께 튕긴 주변에 단계에서 마대버시 류 간주만 들으시는 문제세라 대단한 대송자스 류라 최대전에 아부 송구래서 송구도와 대주 삼로 마보시 당기네 다음에 발이야 과라엘 팽개와라 야 어디지 야 주나
So here we have our kind of body and mind, and just examining in this way again the way that what they are impermanent and sort of impure in the nature of suffering, as well as being selfless. Our body and mind are sort of in this condition where they are mutually dependent. It is the case that our body, for it to function, is dependent upon all sorts of various parts. We have like the various sort of limbs of our body, but within our body, we're dependent upon all of the various different elements, as well as the functioning of our various organs, like our heart and our lungs and our liver and so forth. We need to have external conditions as well. We need to have food and other sorts of things, air to be able to breathe. There's so many causes and conditions that lead to our being alive, that are necessary for that kind of person to be alive. And looking in this way, we can see, due to contemplating the kind of impermanence of the person and the way in which they are dependent upon so many causes and conditions, it can lessen that kind of feeling of there being a solid sort of a self. And also looking at the nature of suffering, that we only have these kinds of aggregates due to the kind of previous karma that we have accumulated. And all of the things that we sort of look to as being somehow stable or solid, like the place that we live, or our youth, our health, our wealth, all of those kinds of things are actually a basis for suffering. These are not things that we should be attracted to, but rather things like our wealth is going to decline. We are going to have to experience aging. All of this is in the nature of suffering due to coming about due to the force of karma and the various afflictions. And so this kind of contemplation, looking at the way in which things are impermanent and in the nature of suffering and so forth, that kind of a sort of like solid autonomous self that we perceive to exist, it is sort of undermined by this kind of contemplation, looking at all of the sort of conditions that are necessary for life. Again, here, this isn't sort of like based upon looking at all these causes and conditions, we go into carelessness. Rather, it's important that we take care of to sustain this kind of body, pay attention to our health. But contemplating in these ways, the way in which things are impermanent in the nature of suffering, aids in our understanding of giving rise to certainty regarding selflessness.
Oh yeah, I'm 진딜로네. 뭐 마와 남기에서도 지시도 땡중다 동바 차장다는 개월 통대서도 뭐 랑원에 주바 켈랭게 도데바다 치드라마다 셈잠발라 소버로 아니 주다마 치르바도 용구도 대저 참마게 뭐 마와 남게 지시도 땡중다 동바 개월 통대서 랑 땡진 레버 조아이나 규단 캔라 땡진 레버 조아이나 랑원에 여고 그래 삼교라 코조 땡진 레버 조아다 랑원에 동바도 개와 통고요래 우마 땡주와다 도저잖아 코치기질 조선 조 통고요라 랑원 마 저게 땡진 레버 조아이나 규단 캔라 때네 코라야 태용고도 아세 규단 캔라 때네 코라야 태용도자 코치 랑원에 여네야 랑원에 수통고라 랑원에 수께고로 아세고라 랑원에 맞게는 아니 고매게네 시차로 고저 삼로야 뭐고 코라 그 랑경원에 랑원에 수매나 이런 거부터 매번에 시르시고라 자 교다 깬라 때지 레버 조아데 랑원에 예배 교선을 삼을 거고요래 싱가르질 떤도 땀내 소리 답수나 티네 마야지 키워드자 코랑원에 수야 터 연구에 소리지 동구도 말아서 When I send a quota, Kobe, Kuda Kengi, Rome, India, Tunisia, Tingur was a Koran to Tajika Marwa. The co Teji Deborah Joina, Kuda Ken Lieutenant Kigina, Rangune Yogo de Esegora. Rangune Chizu such the tended to Gionia, Kigor, Machine Kariki. Teji Deborah Joina, Rangune Yogo de Esegora. Rangune Mana, Tende Yunguma, Juda Ken Lieutenant Kiva de Uman, Gawa de Esegora. Teji Deborah Joa, Juda Kela, Teji Deborah Joata, Rangune Tongbasne Gaware, Rangune Yogore. Matenjo a Janet in Chigi Dross and Rokudoa. Muma Namji Chisido se Tinjunda Tongbasera. Teji Deborah Joa, Juda Kela, Teji Dene Korasuke on Bateda, and then Rangune Tongbani, Gaware, Rangune Yogore Segura. 차단다서 사보다 자문나 신고 개와 펜주 미팅바 개와를 통해서 동바 된주게 돈도 건조 동바대 된주게 돈도 통계와 말에 랑원에 동바이나 매바 차래 매바래 된주 레버 좋아이나 랑원에 요거래 랑원에 매나 된주 레버 좋아 리그 말에 개와래 어디 차단나시 돈이 딘도 가서래 Tinjungi Tondo Matombaso, Conzo Tomba de Rangone Trube Tomba de Tenjin Rever Joa Imbata. Juda Kenda Tedala Tenjin Rever Joan de Colubur Yatan de Rangone Meva, or Te Abuja Hamagubado, Yana Takta La Lungre, Yana Cheda La Lungre Segura. Takjegi Takaruna Lungre. Takjegi Tangi that Uden Joshing Mare Segura. Taktasine Rangune Yobatana, Taktarwa, Rangune Yobatala, Taktasigora, Ti Yobatagora, Ti Takta Londure. Rangune Mena Mevere Sabenia, Cheta Londura. Chebas the Yoba de Mebasune Chevera. Mebas Yobasu Trotabene, Taktasigora. Rangune Mebas Yobal Taguza, Taktas, Takbetas, Ti Tawa de la Tesabatella, Takbar Tawa Sura. Chedas the Yoba de Mebas in a Cheba. The member tower the last shepherd tower sigara. Or the Congo Matazo. Then did that Tombani, two chickily draws and draw the Hamagobato, Yana Conzo Tata Longre, Rangune Yosegre, Yana Rangune Mana Mass, Tamaverish has a massegre, Takpata, Tire, Cheddar Karung, Tal Longre Takseg, Tanya that Udin Joshing Marisagora. Never see Yoba Sujo Mari Yoba the Meba Sujo Maru Kora Nature Kare Yuna, Tita Joto Basicora. Teach you none, Takseg Tanya that Udin Joshing Gora. Oh, teach it Junea. Oh, Tondi Tinjung, or a daily son. Satan and Gavar Tondi Tinjungi, then Gavar Tondi, Tomba Tinjungi, Tondo Maton Bartose. Tomba said, Ten Sawan and Meba Mare. Tenjin Deborah Joa some. Tenjin Deborah Joa de Rangune Tongba de Meva Mare something Yabuji Jo Machina Suyordo. Madu Teda Taksegi Takarun do Longa Meda Yana Takta Longure Yana Cheda Longu Resora. Inikaru Madon Rasayo Mare Sera Medala. Oh, Umatenju Lundine, Tongba da Tenju Tona Mengewa Samdo Masas Umatenju Ludele Tongba. Tinjungi de Gawayo Mare, Chigichil Tross and do that. Chida Samlatandus are Rangune to Tomba Samlatandi Tinjun Koyardo, Tinjungi Koa de Yaburas and Tomba Koyardo Rese. Tola Gagmare, Samlatandi Chigichilia, Tendo Yorese, Sungara. Megawar some do never masse, Tinin Eva Naya Chigichila, Neba, Pave Tross and Jura in this. Tomba Samlatandi Tinjun Koara Shivara, Tinjung Samlatandi Tomba Koyar do it, Chichil Tross and do this order. Yeah, Tibo Chituna.
So here, essentialists, and this is referring then to those kinds of philosophical schools like the Vaibhashikas and the Sautrantikas in the mind-only school, as well as those kinds of non-Buddhist schools that assert some kind of essential or real existence. They see these two, again, that being emptiness and dependent origination as being contradictory, like hot and cold. So for those kinds of essentialists, they would assert assert that if things are dependent upon causes and conditions, that affirms that that thing must exist from its own side. So for them, these kinds of views, like something being empty of existing from its own side, that then contradicts its being dependently originated. If something is not produced or not existent from its own side, then for them, they think that that falls into an extreme of it being utterly, absolutely non-existent. So here, their understanding is quite the opposite of the Prasangika understanding, because they assert that because things are dependent upon causes and conditions, that establishes their existence from their own side. That they arise from causes and conditions is what establishes their having that sort of existence, that we could point to something. There must be that kind of existence from its own side, that we can say, this is that thing. And one establishes that, according to the essentialist, because phenomena are dependent upon causes and conditions. So for them, this kind of understanding of causality, of being dependent upon causes and conditions, establishes that existence from its own side. So when they hear the kind of presentation of emptiness as being empty of existing, phenomena existing from their own side, they then see that as contradictory to their being dependent arisings. And so they as it continues here in the text, as long as they do not see emptiness as the meaning of dependent arising, they cannot free themselves from falling into either the extreme of eternalism or the extreme of nihilism. So here for them, if things are empty of existence from their own side, they fall into this extreme of being totally non-existent. And so instead, they want to assert that phenomena do exist from their own side. And that then falls into an extreme of eternalism, where according to the Prasangikas, you could no longer assert that they're actually dependent upon causes and conditions. So here, again, when we are talking about these kind of extremes, when we assert or exaggerate some kind of existence upon something that doesn't actually exist, in the way that asserting existence from the side of objects in their own right is a kind of exaggeration on top of things, one falls into that extreme of permanence or eternalism. Whereas if you deny the existence of something that does exist, like asserting that emptiness of existence from its own side means utter non-existence, you're denying the existence of things that are dependently originated. This is how one falls into those kinds of extremes. So for them, for these eternalists, there's no option but to go in either of those directions. Either one says that things exist from their own side because they are causally established, and thereby they're asserting a kind of eternalism, or one says that, well, if they don't exist from their own side, then they're utterly non-existent, and one has fallen into an extreme of nihilism. There's no option other than those two. But continuing, it says, however, in the system of the consequentialist Prasangika scholars, when you ascertain these two, not only do dependent arising and emptiness not contradict each other, but also the understanding of one serves to enhance the understanding of the other. So in the Prasangika system, when one contemplates the fact that phenomena are empty of existing from their own side, that reinforces, that enhances an understanding of dependent origination. And when one contemplates dependent origination, finds certainty in that, that helps solidify and enhance the kind of understanding of phenomena being empty of existing from their own side. So in this Prasangika system, these two are actually reinforcing each other, enhancing the understanding of the other.
Oh yeah. Tan jangba tabu de sigdo. Ta dandang anju salu jangba de te so jangbal shar ma do she tal cha ne aura ta ro. Tambu de ta ge do tami sam tan de tal sam tan gora. Ne ta ge chone ne shandala pa kha po gora. Chiter che je ta ge do she ne sheba te she ko le le char cha as. Tambu so so ta so so ranil sam tan tami sam tan ya gora. Jo ta da bu se ta so so casa miche de orwati segura so miche tante te de yoge miti segura ta da bu rangi ngo tu tu imbese rangi ngo de Judan Ken la tene tugudo. Joa Namada Sedi da Tanda Tanda Judan Ken Saju Melungu Juada Soso Nanja da Tazu Kanga Lega Chebal tugudo. Tazu Ngama Lega Yabuchi Doni Chima Yabuchi Tegi Odo. Judan Ken la tene truba yimbese. Yoni Rawadu truba yoya yomare. Ya tende de leni yoba, Judan Ken la tene truba tende ta. Dakshida Chasha la tene takbe tendes. Judan Ken la maboji sobal tene kulubutu truku yordo. O tene tan di chichi residu za kansa residu, mi residu, mi sobo ta ra, mi semda, mi sorwa ta, mi dushida, mi pumbunga. Mi pumbunga bu karul tene ani di mi resu ta ura. Mi shanda ta na sosu sobure tono o te mi chiduse o di trashire tundure stagdo. Sosu rochi ne sosu samlata o nga soa da dushida tesu samlukone nga tevu medu kivu medu sero ya tevan du sero sosu sobule tene nga nagdu sero tevu du sero le fata yordo. 차셰시 요라 코라마잉게 덕시스그라 덕시망부 요라 소보다 셈다 소라던 도시망부도 소불레 참망부도 미다 나와다 나다 제데 소부 차셰망부 요라 대졸레 때네 아니 다시레 던두레 가르스나티 레파타 요도 때네 딱베 텐데스도 어티도 코라마잉게 차셰망부 질레 때네 아니 데다시레 파타로 다가 트래시 인다 저래 콘조레레 레가지도 트래시 레가지 라고나스네 트래시 나고도 세라 콤바자 두근데 트래시 두고도 세라 다 소다 소아다 드시 풍부가보다 자와치데 네 다가 자와체바 루요라 다와뇽기 세세 로 심리 다와르 초스네 다가 다와뇽세 다 동에 뇽세 샤우라 사코 그게 dakshi chasha dole chamamu shochi wara. Dele tenene lupa techichi respa tagi wara. Ta kadi resene tagwe tuende kadi resene zozu sasakewa mare. Chile rese, sobu di resene digu mare, sem di resene di soa di dushi resene digu mardo. Uma tenju lulu tezu ta regiwa mare. Ta meba ya mare. Tezu chasha re lega chidu ta lega chawachiba shaagudwa. 사 때네 따고 삼을 다 샤오래 타녀 여왕게 덕시 지체 덕시 때라네 타녀 니치지 레스발로 따고도 타녀 여왕게 파샤게 얼마도 고랑원에 주요야지 요 말은 강가라 지지 인세 라와도 주바지 요 말에 라와도 주바 따서봐 가디임바스네 주주 스탁제 전에 디레샤세 라야지 요 말에 tel라 따스 메서바래 따서봐 요 말에 따서봐 제서봐 제버제네 다네 트시 카드레 미디 카드레서 소부데르베 셈데르베 인데르르르세네 라요 마도 자 따수도 마주바 제수도 마주바 축메도바 수도도마 축메도스네 코치 당부 때네 딱 와samle 샤워레 다가와 가게 임바스네 축축이 말해 공오라 두고 말해 라로치고 말해 수도도 마주바시도 어다 다디그래 Tutu yimbe, ane tsuktu rawadu truba, tsuktu bamu rawadu trube tongba re esirwa. Tsuktu rawadu trube tongba sonza shenla tujin dreba di trubku re esirwa. Tsuktu bada rawadu trube tongba yimbe se, kora rawagi tsuktu ye yo mara shenda la tujin drene kuyo ngo shaagudwa, ane tutu sigwa ra talya. Tutu yimbe se, tune truba yinla se, tena tinju tongbe tunda uma tenju ludaliya, Judan Ken la tene chunga yinaya, rawadu trube tongba kore, dakshida chasha la tene, tanya jiwanga palu takwa tsamla shagwa yinaya, karsore, rangune trube tongba chimadu umardo. Judan tena, tinjun tongbe tunda se, tenjin delba chunga residu, shanda mambuche la tene, tedan drene, ane koshingo ngo shagwa resigora. Tezuda mandrine ko shatu marwa nganzu sobu pasha sem pasha ne ta se loga rag mardo. Mambula tenjin drel ne ta de shagudo. Nikasre Rawadu Drubentena Rawadu Drube Tongba Yimbe Tune Truba Yenshera. Tena Tinju Tongbe Tundase. Tenjen Dela Jua Yimbe Rawadu Drube Tongbare. Rawadu Drube Tongba Yena Kumeva Maria Shandala Tuzin Dene Lega Chingaji Yores. O Ting Deva Mebashe, Matenju Lula. Tenjen Debra Jua Yimbe, Rangune Tongba, Rawadu Drube Tongba, Sutu to Meba, Rawadu Drube Meba, Rangune Meba, Nanju Tona Temper Meba, or this Yola. Tena Tinju Tongbe Tunda, Tongba Tinju Tundun Drovese. O Matenju Lula, Tongba de Tende Yimbe Tunda Dormato, Mebe Tunda Maresera. Tende Sonza, Tenjen Debra Jua Sonza, Rawadu Drube Tongba Remato, Rawadu Yuna. Tenjin Delgo Marwa, Nishandal, Tanya Yawangi, Tukumado, Koran Sutu Chordo. Roya Nando Nitose, now as the Tendi de Lesora, now attended Lua Mebadas, Tomba Kelete course, Tombas the Rangone Trumba, Rangone Truba, Rawan to Truba Tomba de Sura. Nando Nitose. Tenjin Deberjo, now attended Mamut Soding as a Damida Toyandua, Kansada, Sudan, Tada, Trida, Yabuda, Dobuda. Mamutoyandua, now attend this ura. Tezukanga Nazu Toana, Shintada, Demba Yomare, Nazu Tondiza, Koran when she do some Yito in a Koran when she Yito more Tanders in a Koran when Zuzu said the Jewish service Tongodoa. Oh, did now don't need so say. Now attend the Tension Debra Joatida. Rangune Drive Tombani. Now don't need sauce, need software at the door. Now there's attention to operation I say Rangune to Nanguare. Now I say Yoma Rangune to a Tongbare. Rangune to a Tongbare, the young legacy and gave her the two to be legacy and get you order. Now don't need so say. Jumadabus, Jumadabusene, Juma can get Tata Lambu Trivayina. Narazu Norche Tata Lambu Tongu or the one nation if you get Tata Lambu say, I don't know, Rayomato. Oh, Tindashi. Ngaranzule Tada Shanda Yidua the Monda Trada Yela Soba Rawan to Trubashi Nagi Orde Rawan to Trubashi Yoma Rese Kuran Chashadochi Chawachita Madin in Sosibata and Kotra San Konye San Lefa Tasha Yormado Yung Pa Tapala Metuba Tanya Jawanka Shameguba Rawan to Trubashi Yoma Rese Gordo. Now don't use a Jumadabu Rese Gordo Jumadabu Jumadabu Tanya Dantrawa, Tanya Dantrawa said the Tenjin Debar Joasonda, Chavashi Tumgechi, Yore, Chetamare, Chebamare, Mebamare. Rawadu Druba Meza, Takbe Tale Yomare, Nazu Toanashi, Rawadu Drubas Tungu or the Tende Yomare, Takta Dantress, Taksha Tanya the Tressira, Uma Tawasheduza. Rangune Yona, Tapasigora, to the Travara, Takta the Rangune Yobata Travara. Cheda Suda Rangune Manata, Meva Reshasna, Meva dele Chebasura, Meva. Meva Mare, Tenji Debar Chawachi to Buddhist, Cheba da Chaura. Taxi Tanya da Treva Usuda, Umelam Suda. Rawadu Truba by my Basha, Rawadu Truba in a Taktarua, Rawadu Truba Tombare, Takta da Chavare. Meva Reves and Rawadu Truba Mana, Meva Reves and Meva Mare, Tenji Debasha Yore. Chebe Tata Chavare. Taxi Tanya that is Umelam said Sigora. Taxi that Treve. Taxi Tanya that Treve. Or Umelam Denise. Umelam Sigua. Umelam Dene Keba Uma Tenju Tumu Mayembe. Tende Josugi. Netambashi in this. Oh, Tendego Netende. Joya do Umelam Joya did Umatenju Timu Maimbe Sheba Reso, Shandaga Shatu Mariso, Timu Maimbe, Tende Josu Gine Tambashi in this. Oh, ya Tiba de Teleconnection Dole or the Lundipa. Tiba de Kushana, Yare. Sondo Lundi Lamoga Chilam.
So here, beginning again in the text, it says, it is because the rice seedling exists dependently that it is empty of existing in its own right, independently. So here, we are going from the rice seedling sutra here, but really if we apply this to our understanding of the self, to the I, this is very beneficial. It said that when we contemplate selflessness in relation to the person or the self, we then can sort of extrapolate that understanding to all other phenomena. And so here, if we contemplate, for example, I mean, here in the Rice Seedling Sutra, it's going to use a rice seedling, but taking the example of ourself, we look at the way in which this thing that we call the self is dependent upon so many various causes and conditions, as well as various parts. We are dependent upon our past lives. We are dependent upon the sort of material form that we have, the various elements, the various organs, all of these various causes and conditions lead to something that we can call the person. So here, when it comes to this kind of dependent origination, we can generally speak about it in two different ways. Dependent origination, as in something is dependent upon causes and conditions. It comes about due to various causes and conditions coming together. It sort of comes about adventitiously from those causes and conditions, and the way in which things are dependently designated. Like on the basis of seeing someone's form, we might say, oh, that's Tashi, or in the independence upon our own kind of feelings and consciousness, we designate, oh, I'm happy, I'm sad, or we look at various objects and we designate them as being pleasant or unpleasant and so forth. But it's not as though any of these things exist from their own side, but rather they are dependent upon causes and conditions, as well as being designated upon a particular basis of designation, something that is made up of many parts. So say when we see the form aggregate, we might say, oh, that's Tashi, or that's Tundrup, or whatever. But it's not as though that exists. If we were to try to point to something that exists in that basis of designation in its own right as that thing, we wouldn't be able to find it. But yet we can talk about someone, like when we see the form of someone doing particular activities, we say, oh, that person's doing some work. Or in dependence upon someone being injured, we say, oh, they're like something bad happening to them, we say, oh, they're injured, or whatever it may be. In dependence upon our various feelings and mental consciousness, we say, oh, I'm happy, or I'm sad. But when we try to find then the thing designated, we try to find that self or that I, there's nothing that we can point to. It's not just the form, it's not our feelings or consciousness or any of those individual things, but it's something that is dependently designated on that particular basis of designation. But the self isn't utterly non-existent. It exists, we can talk about it, it's something that exists due to conventions, due to our labeling in this process of mental dependent designation. So when we look at the way in which the self appears to us, it seems to exist from its own side. So here, again, this continuing in the text, it says, moreover, it is empty of existing in its own right. It is because it is empty of existing in its own right that it exists dependently. So phenomena appear to us as though they had some kind of autonomy, like our idea of self is as though we have this kind of self that is not contingent or dependent upon anything else, that is like existent in its own right, that would be able to bear analysis, the kind of us trying to investigate and find something. This kind of existence is what is the way in which things appear to us. But when we really examine, we can see that there's nothing that exists in its own right. And that fact actually establishes that things are dependently or exist dependently. So it is, again, these two understandings that are mutually reinforcing. So it continues into the next. So again, we can talk about these two levels of dependent origination. There are more, but particularly the kind of dependence on causes and conditions. Things are empty of existing from their own side or in their own right because they are dependent upon causes and conditions. And there's the level of dependent designation. Things are empty of existing existing from their own side or existing in their own right because they are dependently designated. We can't posit, we can't point to a self within the various aggregates, our form and feeling and consciousness and discrimination and karmic formations. There's not something that we can point to and identify as the self, but also there's nothing aside from that. We can't point somewhere else as some kind of a self. So it's a mere dependent designation. It exists in this kind of contingent way. Here again, to say that something does not exist from its own side is not to posit its non-existence, but rather those things are then contingently or dependently designated, and things don't really exist in the way that they appear. So here, continuing into the next sentence, it says, this combination of appearance and emptiness, wherein dependent arising is the meaning of emptiness, and emptiness the meaning of dependent arising, is illusion-like existence, or the middle way that is free from the two extremes. So here, when we look at the combination of appearance of things, and this is referring to the infallibility of dependent arising, that negates some kind of extreme of there being nothing whatsoever. And at the same time, when things appear, although they appear to exist in their own right, they are empty of existing in that way. Yet these two things are things can function within this. So when it comes to understanding these two in combination, when it's referred to as like illusion-like existence, in the way that when a magician or someone conjures up various illusions of like horses and elephants and so forth, although those things appear, they don't exist in the way that they appear. And so too, when it comes to things like our enemies and friends, that which we designate as pleasant or unpleasant, good or bad, they don't actually exist in the way that they appear, but that doesn't negate that their existence completely. They have a functionality, and we can talk about how dependent origination means that things are functional rather than totally non-existent. And if they actually did exist from their own side with that kind of autonomy or ability to withstand analysis, that would fall then into an extreme of permanence where there would not be any way for things to be functional. So this kind of understanding wherein emptiness and dependent origination come together, are complementing each other and actually understood in tandem or in connection with each other. This is what is referred to as illusion-like existence, or the middle way that is free from the two extremes. There's no autonomous existence from its own side and that level of like permanence, but there's also things are not totally non-existent. So this path is then the middle way, free from any of those extremes, either of those extremes. And so this is the sacred key point in how to posit dependent arising that is unique to the Madhyamaka Prasangika school. So this kind of understanding in which dependent origination and emptiness are fully sort of complementary of each other, mutually reinforcing, is the unique kind of assertion of the Prasangika school. And so then we'll follow with this quotation from Nagarjuna that follows.
Oh yeah. Tandi kong changi wara, tindra yimbate, ane lobion di karsura. Gumbulu drupke Nagarjuna, tsundo ki kapsu songsha ase, di kong changi wara. Tandi la kone so, tindra yimbala kone, ane tsundo le ase. Gumbulu drupke rwa, tsundo le tindra sondo ase. Kangshi tongdang tingjung danse, ngobu kangshi rangwene drupke tongba yimbe, ane tenjin rebar jungwa re ese wara. Tenjin rebar jungwa ngobu teta rangwene tongba re ese wara. Ume lamdo tenjik barase, kanshi rangwene tongba te tenjin rebar jungwa re ese. Tenjin rebar jungwa yindu ta ume lam sina, umaba namji dobe takshe ki tangi da trewe yu se chi wara. Takshe ki tangi da trewe yu se de ume lam se de. Rangwene drube tongba yinbe takta da trewa. Tenjin rebar juwa yinbe cheda da trewa. Tenjin rebar juwa yinbe ko chawa mechi yo sami ma rese. Tene meba ma rese yo re, tenjin rebar juwa le tene chawa chengechi yo rese se wadi cheba ma re, meba ma re. Rangwene drube tongba se de, rangwa do druba de yoba ma rwa se. Takta ta cheda nyi da trewe lam te, Tunji re sora. Kanshi tongba yemba de tenjo re, tenjo yemba de rangone tongba re, ti yende, ane takche ge tangi da trewe u, rwa, tende yembe tongba, tongba yembe tende su, chawa che neba da rangwa du truwa me kya, chawa che ni su yeba de ume lam sikidwa. Ume lam dawa de tenje bar, sunjo tsungba meba ye sanje de la chasa los. Zundo ye chojo ye kapsu sanje liya, choba sikidwa, sunga cho tsungba meba sanje de chasa. O tende de ke chenpo yinpa de bombo lo dhubdi tsawa shirab tanga o te shungma bu chocho liya tende songpe kone sanje lo tegu dwa kange tenje dreba jo gawa meba keme basa tsawa shirab kapsu tiri de warwa o ya she song se teji gyodya.
So then citing a source for this, so with this in mind, the Venerable Nagarjuna states in his text, Dispelling Debates, so Nagarjuna then says, I bow down to the unparalleled Buddha, who made the most excellent statement that emptiness and dependent arising have the same meaning as the middle path. So here again, this is Nagarjuna is saying that which is dependently originated is free from that kind of existence from its own side. So whatever thing is empty of this kind of existence in its own right or from its own side, then that is dependently originated or dependent arising. And so this kind of understanding, this statement that links emptiness and dependent arising as having the same meaning leads to the path that is free from either the extreme of eternalism or an extreme of nihilism. So because things are empty of existence from their own side, this dispels any sort of permanence, any sort of eternalism of that kind of existence in their own right. And because things appear, they are dependent, there are these appearances, dependent originations, this means that dispels the extreme of utter non-existence, of nihilism, because that is the way in which things exist and function. And so this kind of dependent origination underscores the fact that things are empty from their own side. And so in this Dispelling Debates, as well as in many other texts, we see how Nagarjuna, like in Root Verses of Wisdom, in his homage to the Buddha, praises the Buddha particularly for this unique understanding of emptiness and dependent origination. So we see that this is the way in which the Buddha is most worthy of praise, one could say.
Oh yeah. Takab de tongba se jwara, tongba se de. O tita noya yaga mabu yorto. Kaso de nangba ke ne chö tamje tongba re se gyore se shunya re se warste. Keling yo marsa meba gyur gyore samge tinde yorto. Tondamla chebe se o chö kanga me se ro tinde yung gyora. O ti kaso re. Chede kab de tongba de ya. Chawa chini su yebe tongba le se mare se. Me chashi sekbe chawa chigre, chui lembe chawa chigre, lungi yowe chawa chigre. Tazo lega chinge chi me se, pemba chumge da, neba chinge da ro, tewa da dunga kichi kyu da, tazo me se yo ma re che ra. Kamdi tongba ya ngubu na chawa chini su yebe tongba mingi se. Chawa chini ge me se, ne keke me rwa, dunga nyonge me re, ne tewa toye me re, ne nyingi shenbu da, chanju semji da koya yo marto. Semje mere, ne semje mene tunga nywa yo mardo. Ti mebal sigi yo mare chera. Kam di tongba se, tongba da tenjun se, tongba di yebe tongba le sigi yo mare se. Ngobu nam chawa chini su yebe tongba mingi se. Rangshinji chuba da rawadu chuba tongba le sigi ure se. Rangshinji chuba tongba ye se. Shiro nyingbu chini chu tamze rangshinji tongba namba yangda bo che su tao se kode sungudwa. Ani sume se chu tamje tende re sungdo ani sume trame treme se re le rangshin ki tongba ye re cha de ne te yo mardo cha ko ye yo mardo ta de chi cha se do de chu tamje rangshin ki tongba namba ya do che so ta o se ani su tongba se trame treme sungdo o te she jin ki de ka so ate an ji den ki tanye ji wang ki te dan ba ne ma ye no so go de tene sume trame treme se so yo da o za rangshin ki Kabdi tongba ya chönam chawa chini su yoba tongba la sigi ma re se Rangshingi Truba, Rawando Truba, Rangune Truba, Tsukdub do Truba, Taksu do Truba, Chesu do Truba, Sera, that in the Mebatile Sungore, Sigora. Rawando Truba, Tongba Yindese, Sisele, Tadi Kundrangora. Tenju again, Keba, Sesson Service, the Lovin Daughter, but they are no, Gender Kirde. Take Zashin Deba Siserva, take up in the Resum Shasagora. Coach Anese, Leda Chebabo, Le Yores or Leda, Chebabo, Le Sagbabo, Drebula Sogba, Meadows and Drebuda and Drebunyala Sogba, Meadow, Shemawaya, Maindese. There's a message of Mardasoda. Ona Chishena, Ona Keran Tomba Sigate Karsigorasana, did I Ranshingi Meadows? There's a Ranshingi, Rawando Chene, Ranshingi Truba Maru, Chemache, Tudu Chene, Shandala Turge, Delne. Loda, Tanya Loda, Dashida Tazula Delne, and it did the rest, Chashana, or Tendechi or the Mado, Koran Rangshingi Sutra, Rangune Truba, Tendechi or Marese, and the rest of the Sigurdo. Onachishana did I Ranshin meadows, she number job by Yenose. Ranshingi Mess Shaggy or Mother Messig or Marichera. Tenunga Ma to the Tabaku or Chidi Ranshin Meba Namla Chawa, and Medebe Chere. Nieba sona duba nido nyamna rangshin mesana ne kera mera. Kurang rangshin ki meba ina rangshin meba ina ne mera ko ngo mera. Ti mena chawa che yo mare ti chikba res kera rangshin mesa wa da mesa wa ni ti chikba res samgyora. Chi de rangshin meba namla chawa che ba mete becher ngo bo ma se goda mete becher da nieba sona duba nido nyamna o kera chawa che ba te garsra. Cheba boda le da drebula sobati meba mesewa da rangshingi mesewa cheba rese kyendi jogu rese wara rangshingi mesewa le kyendi jogu rese nyeba sona duba nyedo se kyentanga de sama rangja tera sona nebre tegara kyen jogu rese wara duba nyedo nyamna se tenya yoba mayin de sen de uma chikse glo da sama tanda o tenya de nyeba chungba ma rese ra Rangshin da cheba nam kona la chawa ma to se Rangshin ki druba yin se na ene chawa cheba de teg ma re so ra Rangshin ki druba ina ene shan la to me go ba re chu ku yo ra e ko du che ma yin ge de chu ku Rangshin ki druba ina rawa du druba che Rangshin ki druba ina shan gyu dan ken ge che me go ba da shi da cha she tang ye yong ge sha me go ba che yo go yo no Rangshin da cheba nam kona la chawa ma to ye chirse Rangshin ki tumne chawa rungu mare. Rangshin meba nam kona la chawa tongache. Rangshin ki me tutrup yinsana da chawa kanga tong tegre sigora. Rangshin meba nam kona la chawa ma tonga chiro shirso so de uma chikse ki longtang kdwa tichi runa.
No. So here then there is this kind of danger of thinking, of danger of misunderstanding that when Buddhists talk about sort of non-existence or emptiness, that means total non-existence. So here it's in the text, it says emptiness in this context does not mean that composite phenomena lack the ability to perform functions. This kind of assertion that things are empty of existing from their own side does not mean that this that like fire is not hot and burning, or that fire or the water can't moisten, that wind doesn't have motility and so forth, but rather it's sort of the opposite of that, that if things had that kind of existence from their own side, they would not be able to perform functions. So rather, emptiness here means to be empty of intrinsic or independent existence. So here, instead of understanding this in like a nihilistic kind of sense where nothing whatsoever exists, that emptiness means non-existence, wherein then no one would experience suffering. There would be no sentient beings. There would be no one to attain anything or be harmed by anything. That's not the kind of understanding that one should take from this, but rather that things are empty of intrinsic or independent existence. And as a source for this, then quoting from Chandrakirti's clear words, it says, "We are not saying that action, agent, and effect do not exist. What do we mean? We posit that these phenomena have no intrinsic nature." And so here, the next part of this with the qualm and the answer actually in the Tibetan seem to come all from this quote from Chandrakirti's clear words, not yet going out of the quotation. But so here, like when we see, for example, in the Perfection of Wisdom sutras, like the Heart Sutra, where it is said that one should see perfectly that all phenomena are empty of intrinsic existence. There is no form, no feelings, and it continues on. One should understand that that intrinsic existence is carrying over. It is the case that no phenomena have the kind of intrinsic existence, that sort of autonomous existence from their own side, the ability to withstand or bear analysis. And so here, again, when we are stating that things lack that kind of autonomous nature or are not existent intrinsically. That is not, again, saying that they are totally non-existent, but rather, as it says here in Chandrakirti's clear words, we posit that these phenomena have no intrinsic nature, that they are contingently established, dependently originated, not existing from their own side. So it's not falling into some sort of extreme of total non-existence, but actually if one were to hold that they had such intrinsic existence, that would negate their ability to function. So here the qualm comes, someone says then, well then it is not feasible for things with no intrinsic nature to perform functions, and you are still subject to the same fault mentioned above. So again, that this opponent thinking that a lack of intrinsic existence means utter non-existence. That's not what is being asserted, but rather the answer comes, that is not true. It is only things that possess intrinsic nature that cannot function. So if things had this kind of intrinsic nature, they wouldn't be able to function. They wouldn't be subject to causes and conditions. They wouldn't be subject to dependent designation. Rather, they would exist sort of in their own right without any kind of contingency or dependency. And in that way, that kind of autonomous existence is in contrast with functionality. That doesn't allow for functionality. So the kind of here, if they had that sort of intrinsic existence, again, phenomena would not be dependent upon any kind of causes or conditions, not be dependent upon their parts or on their basis of designation. It is only because they lack that inherent or intrinsic existence that we are able to posit their functionality. As it says, it is only things that lack intrinsic existence that can function, and that is the end of the quotation, at least in the Tibetan version.
Oh yeah. Rangwa do drube tong ya se ta rangwa ne drube tong ba ye na ya. Tenjin drebar jo ala jawa tamja ruwa. Ruwa chachi ruwa se gora. Me sek ba ta lungi yo wa da. Chu lem ba ta ruwa sai tenche ba la so ba. Ya ne ruwa da te ba ta ruwa. Kewa drubne dawa to ba ta. Mikewe tonghe to ba la so ba. O to lega chawa judan drebi chawa kanga rungu re se gora. Rangwene drube tong ba ye na ya. Rangwene me na ya. Tene drube chuji. Ngobu tsama tamje rang chawa chetu penyo retu gurese. Penba da neba la soba chawa chetu ba shagu rese. O di shaya de. Ani shindu shakawa rese. Rawadu drube tong ya tu drub tsam nye la. Kyunde chache tamje ruwan dine. Jene shindu to kawa das. O tingi dewa meba shaya de shindu to kawa rese. Ngobu mawa tuzu shatu medwa. Tishin shikbe sungi zoe ji cheba samur songde so de to kawa yemba da sanje ge sungi naga zoe naga be cheshu ke cheshu de yemba songde se ura sashi le se lobe ludu ge ne de dinal sawashira kabzu songdo ase ura tichir shembe chö de tengdo kawa ken gyur ne tube to ne chö de le rabdu logwa ki wais o nagar june kawa songdo se sashi kabzu tichir shembe chö de yese uma bale shembe uma wata zugu yordo tichir shembe se uma bale shembe uma wata zugu yese chö de yese tenji drebar chöbe chö de yese ro tenji debara juwa da tongba imbe chu de se ting do kawa ken jur ne se ting tokbar kawa ken ber ne shin sabu de shin de kale kabu imba ken ne so gora tube tu ne choden le rabdu lokbar juba yes tuba sanje chumde de sanje sa ne chu tambale lo ne chu masum je da kashe shubar do o de shubar re se gora nganjo de sanje chumde de sanje sa ne chu masum ne shu ne ane changba da zo ya chu so ro che che shu do wa de ji da bi chu shi ko ye su la de ya ko ar me ne be me ma nam da mi do ne bar cha se song do wa sabshi to de se de ma che saba shiwa traba da trawa se de dong ban yi de song go do sabshi to de se de ma che de ji da bi chu shi ko ye se sulla teglia cormene me manada mi do never jata te koto ya kabu de shase ne songi mese rani tene ne embal ne ge songorto nanda mi never jata shedanse o tene shide le jase rongo bulu duke shide kapso tagana sheso doase tenje debar jo de jawa ye songi jo gi cheba samu dese tenje debar jo ase tongni de nigal ko chora tenji debar juwa yinbe, rangune tongba, rangune tobe tongba yinbe, tenji debar juwa yinba de sungora. Tenji debar juwa de kyawa ye sungi zuwa ge chiba samu de, sangye ge sungi nage pe, jeshu ke cheshu de ye sungora, sabshu de ye sungora. O tenda o de to kale kabu de se, to kawa yuza sangye ge, de to kawa yinba de kene, sangye se ne chuma su ne to shuye de, sabshi tu de se de ma che se. Tuzi dabi chushi koyo ni sola tenja kwa mima nanda nebar chas soya ti tiri ese. Kingo maa tozo ke tezu toto umadwa. Uma tenju wada tezu mato chiri. Oya tishi kyuna.
So,
Ishura.
here, then continuing again, although everything is empty of independent existence, the functioning of causality is feasible within mere dependent existence. So, all functionality, all of like sort of going and coming and staying, and the fact that virtue will lead to happiness and non-virtue will lead to suffering, all the sort of like actions and effects that they have, including the sort of things like fire burning things or water moistening things, wind having that sort of motility. All of these things are functional within the fact that they are mere dependently originated, that they don't have any kind of independent existence. So this is the way in which these two are non-contradictory, but this is extremely difficult to understand and is also said to be the most profound and cherished principle in the treasury of the Tathagata's teachings. So here, to posit these as being non-contradictory is something that is extremely difficult, but to do so is really the most profound and cherished kind of principle within the Buddhist teachings. So for example, the essentialists, those kind of realists, are not able to understand dependent origination and emptiness as being in harmony, as being mutually complementary rather than contradictory. So here, quoting from Nagarjuna's fundamental verses on the middle way, it says, because he understood that his teaching would be difficult for others to fathom, the Buddha decided not to share it with others. So after the Buddha had attained enlightenment, recognizing how difficult it is for others to understand this Dharma, he remained without teaching for a period of time until he was sort of compelled by Brahma and others who made this request. So we've seen there's like that the verse expressing this kind of profound, peaceful, free of elaborations, uncompounded, Amrita-like Dharma. This is something that the Buddha, upon initially realizing it, saw that it was so difficult for others to understand that he remained without teaching it for some time. Of course, because this is so difficult to understand without some kind of contradiction. So the continuing from another quotation from Nagarjuna, this time from his friendly letter, it says, "This dependent arising is what is profound and cherished in the treasury of the conqueror's teachings." So although this is quite difficult to understand. It's really the sort of essence, the most cherished kind of thing within the treasury of the conqueror's teachings.
Oh yeah. Tena ume lam chowa na se tawa tongba ni tawa choyo ko yona ro. Ta che tanye da che ume lam de chowa na se rang de jangba da bu shi so ne se. De le yebe jangba ina da khangba ina da kansa ina da sta so so de kare ne cha sho do. Shi so ne se. Juda ken de le de dar chowa da se. Juda ken chokba la tene ko jujin wa ge Rame ba lubur to juare sam tension deba chuda kela tension deba jo sam tangordo gabe chude tende ge namsha das yang ga do sa ko chuda kel chule tende ko ras ga do yorda ji do gordo je she ji ba se gabe chude tende ge namsha da rage namsha das chuda kela tende cho chuda kela tende ga do tende ge namsha de segura Kyawadang Gagbe Namsha. Rangi Dakshila Tene Takbe Tenjungi Namsha Didales. Kye Tsarate Rangi Dakshi Kansa Rojine Pumbunga La Tene Takba. Rwa. Oh, Tene Pe Chala Soyo Shabarachine Kambutra Rachine Namdu Rachine Kumi Mambu Kale Mambu Chabjere Soyoche Tishiti Kiri Ordo. Shugi Orwa. Chuda Kengi Chegi Ordo Kyujinche Kansa Chebabu Kansa Da. Tarda Kubada Tamambo Yura. Tezu Kanga Chigi Ordo. Today, Tezu Samal Tenani to Namdu in a current discern Nashi. Dina Chasha Chilo Pagbada Nalo Koloda, Tamambo Yordo Chala. Nashila Tene, Tezu Shichene, Tanamdu Res, the Namdu Res. Any day Kansa de Tania, Namdu Persons, Namdu Pabgidose. Namdu Chito, the Chala Chili Kirchas, and Namdu Kirchas, Shagua, Sawas, Namdu Nal Mitegi or Mindu or does it like a kangaroo or Inako Dashida Chashala Thursday Drelne, Lepa Tagba, Tesam and Namdu Shagu, the Matochik, Tan Namdu Penge, the Cadres, Chilizuku Seke Marwa, Chilo Bagba de Mare. Nalo tarda chi machine tonda mambo yiri chala mambo yiri tarda tizure zu zu sake yo mara tene tedala tene tane takwa chamle shagura namru pirada namru chawa chebada dinane tarda chi machine chile kyo shoso namru kyo shoso se ti shagudwa se tenjin debara jo tenjin dene le pa tane sha ta kadire sene tsega rone shida raya shi yo mara taksu ba che so ba tende ke merdo Tende delle nire samtangdo atambu chuda kele tene chala mambu yore tezu tsone sugu yora. Suyo tsane ne tanya tane tatile ming tagdo tene takbe tende sigdo. Tene kebe tene takbe tende. Tende ki namsha da dakshila tene takbe tenjungi namsha didale ume lam chogo ba yende sashile. Tawa tsedu tende chene. Chuda kele tene kebe tende ta tene takbe tende samlutane ne rangone trube tongbate la koara e tapshi chawure sora. Tenjin debra joa ka ta tsawa shire lungtang do. Tenjin debra joa ka tene tongba nyedu shes. Chashe da chuda ken da dakshida chashe la tenje tedan rene trub tengenge ngobu kayin ba te sora. Tene tongba nyedu te rangone trube tongba re sora. Rangwa trube tongba yo mara. Korangi rangshingi tsu truye ke yo mara sora. Tene tongba nyedu shes. Tane ko tongba nyenen de mere vesana. Namdu mere kansa mere vesana. O ti mare kansa yore namdu yore. Roa namdu pergi yore te yore kansa kewe lesa gore mige sa tewa nyungore tunga nyungore yore sora. Ten tongba nyedu shes. Kade sora tene tene dagba te se. Rangi dakshila tene, chashila tene, di chichi res, di namdu res pa dagadwa. Di mi res, di pala res, di tondo res pa dagadwa. O tele tene takba samle shaku res gora. Tene tene takba te se. Tene ume lami nos. Tenjin debari joare. Rangune Tongbare. O Tilia, Teji Debra Joare, Rangune Trube Tongbare. Rangune Tongbane, the matter the mother, then a talk about some Shagores. Takshida Chashel Tene, the Kawar and the Pumbar and the Mir and the Kambar and the Motor and the Namrude, the Kambuda Resaba Ming Tagra, Tagbate Samli Bashagures, or Tene Takwasam. Tanya Yawanga Shagwa. Dakshila Ten and Dozig Tanya Yawanga Shagwa. Tiwanga Yabasa. Korajan Su Yaba in any call it the Rawan the Rawa to Trubarwa. Tanya Yawanga Shagwa Regmato. Tokbe Wanga Shagwa Sedua. Teje Debra Joaka, Tene Tomba Nidu She, Tene Tene Dagba, this water you down to Shegura, Tene Tene Dagba, Tinu Umela Minosa, Chebaya Mare, Dagbaya Mare, Rangune Trubaya Mare, Rangune Mena Meberes, Meba Mare, Chawashigris, Taksig Tanya the Umate Resura, Tinu Umela Minos, she dance. Solu Jangbe Dole Jata, Yamdu Loshan. Think there is something there, Solu Jangbala Signese, Kelonamla Dodi Sonsose, Kelonda, Teji Debra Joa, Toma de Chutongose, Teji Debra Joa de Abuja Tonsona, and it Neluti Tonto Gordo. Oh, Tia Abuja Tonsona, then the Abu Tonsona, Chu de Tongres, Chu Palamia like Sugora. Teji Debra Joa Toma de Chutongos, Chu Palamia Gege. Nesude Nelute Tongres. Su Chutonga de Palamia Jeg Nelutonade, and it teleton Joe and Drebu Sangege, and Neluta do de Tonades. She so sauce. Can I tend to get you them? And the Palamia Jeg that the Chema Yongra, Tendicus, that under water young children Nedmata. Kelonda, Teji Debra Joa Tonga de Chutongos. Su Chutonga de Sangye Tongose. Shugnelu Tonade, Sangye Gnelu Tonades. She so sotena. Then they get chunum. Rangshingi Tongo Shechawa Denis. Alle word Tiba the Labgimbe, yeah, Tiba the Chison.
No.
Sangye Tongo Sheson sauce, yeah.
No. So, here, then, thus, when you seek the middle path, you must take an object such as a rice seedling and search for this path in terms of the presentation of, first, the dependent arising of the causality involved in both its creation and destruction, and the dependent arising involved in its being imputed on a basis of imputation. So, here, when we are ourselves sort of seeking out this path, seeking out the view of the middle, whatever sort of object we take, whether it's a rice seedling or the self or whatever sort of thing that we have in front of us, we should examine it in terms of both its causality, in terms of the dependent arising of the causality involved in both its creation. So things arise adventitiously due to a variety of causes and conditions. That object, that thing that you have taken, is dependent upon various causes and conditions for its arising. And so too, when it comes to its destruction, its extinction, this is dependent upon various causes and conditions. So that's the first sort of level of looking at the dependent arising of the causality of things involved in both its creation, the way that things come about, and their destruction. And then as well, one should contemplate the dependent arising involved in its being imputed on a basis of imputation. So here, when it comes to whether it's our self, like the self that is designated in dependence upon the 5 aggregates, or like a computer or a plane or whatever it may be, we look at these various things and we see that they are dependent upon all kinds of causes and conditions, all sorts of various parts. Like something like a plane takes a great deal of effort. There are all kinds of, like, there's the external parts, there's internal sort of machinery and workings and all of that. And when we look at a plane, we can say, oh, it's taking off. Oh, it's landing. Oh, that plane, there's a problem in that plane and it's not able to go. And we can say those things coherently within the context of conventional reality. But if we try to point to something within that basis of designation that is the plane, that exists as the plane without being other than something that is merely dependently designated on that particular basis, we can't find something else. We can't find something that is sort of like apart from the various parts, apart from the basis of designation or this process of designating with mind. So here, again, when it comes to contemplating these various phenomena, whether it is sort of something like a plane or the person or whatever it may be, one should search both in terms of that causality of things arising due to various causes and conditions, as well as recognizing things as being imputed upon a various or like designated upon a particular basis of designation. So this allows us to understand how things don't exist from their own side. They are, again, dependent upon various parts, dependent upon that basis of designation, dependent on the various causes and conditions that lead to its coming about. And so, therefore, things are empty. But that when we say, like here, as Nagarjuna does in his fundamental verses on the middle way, whatever is dependently arisen, that is explained to be emptiness. That, being a dependent imputation, is itself the middle way. So whatever is dependently arisen, this is then asserted to be empty. And so when we hear this word empty, someone might think like, oh, that means total non-existence, as though there's no sort of happiness or suffering, no beings whatsoever. But rather, instead, it means that things are existent, but not in this way that they appear, as though they have some kind of like solid existence from their own side that is autonomous, not dependent or contingent upon anything else. Like when we see a plane, we can say, oh yeah, there's a plane. But if we search for that thing, we try to point to what is that plane, there's nothing that can be found. But yet that thing is not totally non-existent. To say that things are empty is not that they are non-existent, but rather that they are dependently arisen. So whether it's a human being or a pot or a pillar or a computer or an airplane or whatever it may be, these are all existent as mere designations, as mere imputations posited by the force of conceptuality. So here in the second half of this verse, again, that being a dependent imputation is itself the middle way. This kind of existence as being a dependent imputation avoids both the extreme of being like a nihilist, wherein there's nothing whatsoever, or an eternalist, where things are sort of permanent and fixed and unmoving. So seeing then going back to the rice sutra, it says, the Blessed One, after looking at a rice seedling, spoke this sutra to the monks. Monks, whoever sees dependent arising sees the Dharma. Whoever sees the Dharma sees the Buddha. So here, if one understands this well, this kind of middle way that is free from the extremes of nihilism as well as the extremes of eternalism, and see well the way in which things are dependently originated. One who sees the dependent arising sees the Dharma, here referring to the Dharma as the Eightfold Noble Path, recognizing the nature of things, the mode in which that abides. Then whoever sees that, whoever sees the Dharma, whoever understands the Dharma in that way, also sees the Buddha. So here, following this quotation from the Rice Seedling Sutra, which again is when one sees that kind of nature of the Dharma and the Buddha as lacking any kind of intrinsic existence, but still fully functional, this is something that we shouldn't just accept because of the Buddha said it or because the Buddha is powerful, but rather this is something we accept based upon our own kind of investigation and analysis.
Oh, yeah. Tena tendre ji chu nam se ta chu tu shan ro ju se tena se ta ma ju se te so le tena so se yo do tendre ji chu nam rang shin ji tong se san ji chum de ge ne te ji de bar ju ve chu da ke le te ji de bar ju wa da tene tak be tendre de le tene so go ra Tende ji chu nam rangshin ji tongo se rangshin ji trube tongba re se. Kuda ten la ten ji rebar jo chu kain bata. Dakshi la ten en dokshi ji tokbe di ho se ming da tokbe takbe chu kain bate se ten takbe tende kain bate se. Rangshin ji trube tongba re. Rangwe ne trube tongba re. Rangi ngoyo trube tongba re. Manzo rangi ngoyo yoba tonggu yore te tonga na shi tembar ma re. Tembar ma truba re se. Tongo so tinte song yore se ra. O she chawan tene kebo ke kachi nang che ne te kurang ke wang che pechu che ne tawa rang yin se shenda kele ko uro don. O tena shi sanje ke ma kachi nang ne te chinju sama ke te rangwa meba kele ko ba tinte ma re se. Te kele ko ya rikpa kyusen mambu le tene kyusen te tante yo se te sone ma ane ngara zu te kele ko yor ma to kyusen meba daga sanje song re se kele ba tinte ma re se go to kebu ka chik tabu se wang dan doba samje do ko ba she ko nyen ne do ko ba she ma re se te yin ma yin ngara zu trubji samlu tan je ne rikpa mambu yor o te zol tene te yin ba de she go re se go to sanje song ba sam yi che ba she ma re se trubji ji rikpa ta ya ba she yo re se tong ba trubji ji rikpa mambu yo re se ten re da tin te da ke na ne ja rang ne trubbe tong ba trubji ke rikpa mambu yo be na ne ne kyusen tartu dame ba be rikpe gebu tabi ten re rikpe gebu tabu rikpe gebu ten re ten se go ra ga ja rikpe gebu tabi ten re ten se de ten re ki ten se te re se go ra gebu de bunge mai lo so chene kung tu sa re de tar tu sa de chindri mandri yo ne gebu ya to gu yo to tar tu sa de o tene shi ngo ne lu kar yi mai de ten re le to gu yo ra na ba chena judan ken le ten chin de par jo su de da tene ta ba ta o te le tene ane rang shi ji tu be tong ba ten re le tene me da ba tu so de ten re le tene do nga tu to de ro ten re le tene da me ba tu to ra o ten chin de par jo la tene ane judan ji che ba tak ji ra wa chin ge ta ye ba ka tu gre ten chin de par jo la tene tak be che ba bo ye ba chiso se arab da judan che ba bo tak ba yin ge tak ba rang jung ge chi be che ba se ra te so kang ge de ten re tene pa go to yo to ti che ten jo re ban de ne tang e tra wa ta da che ba che se ra ten chin de par jung wen jung dan jung lu de le tene ene ta wa ngem ba mang bo chi wa re te so kang ge de ma yin ba de de ge ha ko to gu re so go ra ne na lu gu phe sha ye me da dong e tong dam me le so ba te so ten re ten ji le tene trup to yo do ngusum do kyudan ken le chawa che da tel ten pa trup to yo ma da ta ste te re che yi chi che ko ba ten de ma re se yo do ten de ge re ban de ni la ten ka se re ten de ge ten jin de la kya bu ge khe ba nam ji ta bu ge khe ba so yo da ri ge bu ten de ten ji so gu ra ne ten de ge ten ji she yo so nga ba yo so chinga ten de le ri ge bu se ri ba ka ga na ta pe ta tu se ru de te re she so gu yo do o te de te ya ten de so ba de ma zo ya ne yan do sam lu ta ne te le te ne me da dong ye tong da me la so ba da tak ji ra wa che ge da me ba la so ba da ro ene tak be ju da ke me ba tak be ji de che ba da che ba bo da chi so la so ba o te zo ka ga de ten de le te ne go to gu yo do o te so de te ya ne yan do nga zo sam lu ta ne ti to ne ngwe ne su se da ma di ba nga zo sam ju na le ye ba no du mang bu ye ba te ten de ten le te ne se ya da ro a chin ji ma lo be te ne ten da de ba ten de sam lu ta ne she to ba cha go de te ya ne yan do sam lu ta ko che de se do ya ten de so o ya
So here again, therefore, you should not accept the statement dependently arisen phenomena lack an intrinsic nature merely because it is the Buddha's wish or because the Buddha has some power, as you would accept the edict of the king. Rather, there are limitless reasonings establishing this statement to be true. So here, when it comes to the Buddha having taught that all phenomena are dependently arisen, and dependently arisen phenomena lack this kind of intrinsic existence. So the Buddha taught this thing, taught that whatever is dependently originated is empty of that kind of existence from its own side. And although phenomena appear to us as though they have that kind of intrinsic existence, if we actually examine and investigate, we can see that those things which are dependently arisen are lacking in any kind of intrinsic nature, although they appear like that to us. And so this is something that we shouldn't just accept merely because it's the Buddha's wish, or because the Buddha has some sort of power and we're afraid of that or something, or accept it just as we would the edict of a king, but rather it's based upon our own reasoning and our own logic that we can establish the fact that things are that dependently arisen phenomena lack an intrinsic nature. It's actually using this reason of dependent origination that we can establish things like impermanence and suffering and selflessness and so forth. This kind of reason of dependent origination can eliminate the kind of grasping at a permanent, autonomous, unitary kind of a self, that more sort of a coarse view of a self. It can also eliminate the sort of idea of a permanent self-arisen kind of creator. Dependent origination is able to eliminate all of those kinds of wrong views. And so it is based upon our own contemplation of dependent origination, that things are dependent upon causes and conditions, as well as they're being dependent upon the process of designation. It's not that we should just accept that things are dependently originated because the Buddha said so, but based upon our own logic and reasoning, we can establish this and actually eliminate many wrong views. So again, among these, the sort of reasonings, the limitless reasons establishing this statement of dependently arisen phenomena lacking intrinsic nature to be true, among these, the ultimate and peerless reason that proves this lack of being established by an intrinsic nature is the reason of dependent arising. This is the sort of ultimate reason that we can put forth for phenomena to lack some kind of intrinsic nature. And therefore, Indian and Tibetan scholars praised this reason of dependent arising, saying the reason of dependent arising is the king of reasons. This is a key point that should be contemplated again and again. So again, based upon the kind of this ultimate, this reasoning of dependent origination can eliminate so many wrong views. It has the sort of potential to eliminate our grasping at things as permanent and that which is suffering is happiness and so forth. And so based upon knowing the way in which things are dependently originated, properly understanding that, that can eliminate such wrong views that we should repeatedly contemplate with this kind of reasoning and engage in it again and again.
Oh yeah. Da xi ji le对不导师的大学给我是这些个多。xi ji le对不导师的大学给我。其他个导师的大学的导师的导师就有的xi ji le对的导师的大学给我是多。导师是那边的康巴的就那国大给工的这边的套的康贝加了人的导师了吧。康巴的大学是了大学去，你康巴的大学去了。풍부하보던 아주 소보다 샘다 소하다 뜻을 간거 덕시로 강사스 다스는 덕시되라 남루를 지나 남루치 빡바다 콜로다 나로 마신다 레레레레데 덕시로 될 때는 딱 봐도 남루데 덕시되라 될 때는 딱 덕시되라 저는 시질을 때도 남루를 지나 그 덕시되다 덕시되 개기로 덕시스도 차셔레레레네 치 빡바다 나로 콜로다 아니 지금 마신다 때도 레레레네 낚시를 되어라. 둘이 딱 배쳐도 남루들이 되어도. 시직을 때도 낚시 따숩게 해서라. 지다 낚시 따숩게 말하거나 미행하라주 소부디네 딱 낚시로 와. 딱 낚시로 와. 다양 소부 코란을 락바다 강바다 치다 나스네 따숩제 소부 코란데야 따숩에 누구라. 소부딩 아주 낚시에 딱 낚시리도 따숩에 소부 야나 강발락발라 소바다 미 나와 나라 소바 테솔 때네 류시 기부 류시제 딱이어도 저 낚시다 따숩이 얘기 말해 따숩 컨디션에 그 낚시지 요구도 덕시 지는 덕시 코란래 양 덕시 여고로와 오 디스고라 시질로 되베 덕시다 덕시 개와스 야 오래 디실람나 담보
Mm. So then we turn to this next point, which is the contradiction in one thing being both the basis of imputation and the object imputed. So when it comes to the thing that is designated or imputed and then its basis of designation, those two, in the case of one thing, cannot be the same. So here, when it comes to like, it is on independence upon the 5 aggregates that we designate the self, the I. So that self, that I, is not the same thing. The thing which is designated is not the same as the basis of designation. And so, but here, like for example, the way that we designate like a plane on a particular collection of parts, or we designate the person on the collection of their 5 aggregates, those cannot be the same thing. It would be contradictory for the thing designated to be the basis of designation. But this, we should understand, it's contradictory only in the context of one thing. So like for example, our form is part of the basis of designating the person. But when we take that form, the thing that we call a person's body is then the thing designated upon a particular other collection of parts. So all of these are always sort of relational. There are contexts in which, say, our form then becomes the thing designated, and it is designated on this basis of things like our hands and our arms and our legs and our whole collection of those parts. And so although in the context of the person, it is part of the basis of designation and thus is not the thing designated. In the context of like the human body, it is the thing that is designated, not the basis of designation. So when we're talking about different things, that's not contradictory, but it is contradictory for one thing to be both the basis of imputation and the object imputed.
Oh yeah. 당가라서 미 다다 강사서라 다당하다 강사시다 된지르와 미 다다 강사시바야세 집에 소지 규진나 소발에 중심세 뭐지 레다 내지 단다 소외 때만 붙일 때는 고소고요도 중심세 랑게 다시 직소지 감루다 랑게 다시 집에 랑시제지 감루 소고 나르예베 착부 차도들 사이 감세도 니 추감 차라 소버도 추감 사이감 추감 저도들 매 감세 롱게 감세 우다 터주다에서라 사이감 추감 매감 롱감 남게 감세 동사 부가 남가들으시라 우당고요를 나로려 동보요고도 우당에 들으시고라 부가 남게 감을 봐 수지 감자 사이감 추감 매감 number 10 kamla soba kam rusera kechi nam kechi chungni seba me kechi na kechi ne kechi kechi lugi yi kechi susu kechi tai kechi te ta sokbo sugu chada te ma bu yordo kechi nam se kechi nam da se phumbu nga bo namle kaya da yin bashim o te su kanga da ga dakshi re se gordo 디나네 찍리 다레세 찍리야 임베치 요마레소라 다시 풍소령어 타데비야 대주강가 파샤네 텔레페ngo 타데바 ngo보세부나시 대주 많이 계시 따다발라나시 베카가시 ngo 타데스도 ngo 타데 베들로스 로가인가 ngo보세부나시 풍부가보디 파샤티 많이 계기야 ngo보세부나시 풍부가 ngo보나시 세부나시 다스 로가 파시요 디에요 말에서라 당시 풍소령어 타데베 다야멜라스 대단나야 풍부소라 때네 다지 당에 딱 봤으면 저와 진리기 다 좋고 그래서라 저zul에 때네네 다스 다네 되네 저와 진리기 좋아다 대바다 대와녀 동해녀 강사데 저와 진리 샤고 그랬을 때잖아 다 용게데 카드레스네 찍려서 우주세계요 말해서 당연히 신달을 써봐 컴퓨터를 써봐 남들을 써봐 때도 차시만 보여도 Kolola soba, tezo rere ne dakshi rese. Yala shinda tezo rere ne dakshi mambu yore. Tongta mambu jira namru tsunayne. Tendi tezo kanga de shinda rungu ma res kora dakshi rede. Tena shinda namru yimbachi kambuta di rese chigli zosu sake yo mara. Tena shise taga dakshi pumbu so kaya dayemba pumbu nga ta tina yebe saju melongi juwala soba tezu na dayemba chi yo ma resi ora teda la tene daje tagbare tezu dakshi chene dade tagbare dade takshu re tezu kanga kogu dakshi re dakshi di dayemba regi ma re tela tene tagba nyeji te mayimba trups chera chashe re re la tene pa dadu za dakshi di takshu di regi marwa shichik tu di dakshi takshu ger re Tedala tene taji takba yinbe se, kaanla tene dogbe dakshi tenyi se, kaanla tene taksaki ta, kaanla tene ta doksaki dakshi yina, ta mayinge chi kora, ta de takshu rwa, pumbu nga wade dakshi rwa, sa pumbu nga yana ne ta yinba chi yina, tene dakshi ta, takshu ti kaka kordo, tene dogbe dakshi ti, tela tene takbe, takshu ti miruwa sungbe chirsi. Tanda oti kaanla tene takbe dakshi ti, tela tene takbe takshu ti mayimba chi kore se, dakshi nane takshu ti yo mare, takshu si ti tedala tene takba shakura, takba tsamla shakura, tenyembe kung changi yora, loben dao traba ka chendar kede, uma jubwe kab sungsa, dole pumbu tene yin sungba, tichir pumbu du sam da ma yinsa, doye kab su pumbu tsokba le tene taji takba yin sungsha achera, pumbu tsokba, pumbu nga tsokba la tene taji takba yinde, pumbu nga tsokba di dama rese, ti dakshi rese wara. Dole pumbu tene yin sungba, tichi pumbu de tsam dama yinse, pumbu deba tsam di dama rese, ti daga dakshi rese wara. Tina shi sokbo da, semda, tsoga da, dushi da, da tina nesa da, chuja, la sokba, tizu kanga, rene dama re, daga dakshi rese wara. Ti kung changi wara majuba. Dole pumbu tene yin sungba, tichir pumbu dusam da ma yinse. Pumbu duba la tene ta takba rese. Ti songza pumbu duba di da ma rese. Ti dakshi rese. Ta di takshu rese. She song se. Tena she song so. Tena ta da kansa cheba ya gyujin. Gyudwa. Gyukade rasu tanda. Dime rese. Tena dada kansa cheba ya gyujin, ta dakshi pumbu sola, tene chunga tsamdu yoba yenji sirwa. Dada kansa la soba tezu kanga, dakshi pumbu sola, tene chunga tsamdu yoba yenji. Pumbu simne, pumbu nane chi, pumbu dakshi reswa, pumbu nane da yenba chi shaya yo maare, pumbu simne se, pumbu nalo ne tsene dire shase, chik zugu tsuksa yo maare sora. Da yenba shi niju me la asa. Yang dakshi tezu pashan ti mainge daji yang loga lo supe ngo kaka jiri yorba te yo ma resi wara. Kaya yang dakshi pungbule ngo shen shine kya ta imba shingi ju me desi. Teta na ta de nyi ju yo na ni ta rang shin ju yo bari rore. Ta rangwa du druba yo ko bari. Ti tini se ni nyi yo na ta rang shin ju druba yo ko ti yo ma resi. Ano kada. Da yoba rina ha tedar tsene da yenba shin namya nipa misi to su oya tishikyo shana.
So here, then, continuing from this point of the contradiction in one thing being both the basis of imputation and the object imputed, the person or the self, again, these are sort of synonymous, in connection with a human being arises from a collection of various causes and conditions that are collections of perishing objects. There is nothing from this, there is nothing that is the self from among the bases of imputation of self. So here, the way that this is translated is a little bit strange, but so the kind of various organs, the senses, or the five psychophysical aggregates, really this is referring to the kind of the sort of various kinds of elements and things that make up the human being. So here, the sort of various things that make up this basis of designation include like the elements, the sort of heat that is within our body, the various kind of solidity of our body, the moisture and so forth, the sort of empty spaces between things, the kind of wind. There is again here nothing that is the self among the bases of imputation. So like the various 6 elements or the 5 psychophysical aggregates or any of the sort of basis of designation, we can't point to anything within that that is the self. And again, the self arises from a various kind of causes and conditions, as well as a collection of various parts, our previous karma and the various sort of elements that make up this kind of a basis of designation or something that are constantly perishing and changing. But there's nothing within those that one can point to as saying like, this is the self, this is it, I can point to it and find it. But there is also nothing that is the self that is a separate entity from these bases of imputation. It's not sort of like there's something distinct like yellow and blue, where we can point to a self that is somehow unconnected, unrelated to the aggregates. But rather it is the case that these are things that are merely imputed. So thus the self, which is nevertheless able to function, is posited by merely imputing the convention self, independence on the aggregates and so forth. So here the treaties often compare the self to a chariot. Just as none of the bases of imputation of a chariot, its various parts, are suitable to be the chariot, so none of the bases of imputation of the self, the aggregates and so forth, are suitable to be the self. The reason being that the self is imputed in dependence on the aggregates and the rest. So it's not, therefore it is said that it is not feasible for the basis of imputation, that independence on which something else is imputed, to be the imputed thing. So here again, we have this various sort of like collection of parts, our aggregates, and all of the various things that contribute to the sort of collection of things upon which we designate the self. Well, the self can't be any of those things. It's not as though among the 5 aggregates we can point to something or anything else within that as being the self, but rather those serve as the basis for imputing a self. So too, like when we have something like a chariot or a computer or a plane or whatever it may be, we designate that object on a particular basis of designation, but you can't say that thing is something within the basis of designation. Those are 2 separate things. So Chandrakirti then says in his entry to the middle way, the sutra states that the self is imputed in dependence on the aggregates. Therefore, the mere combination of the aggregates is not the self. So, again, it's not, the aggregates act as a basis upon which we designate this thing self, but there's nothing that can be found within those. There's no way, continuing here in the text, there's no way to find something that is the self from among the aggregates. So we can't point to something among the aggregates that is that thing imputed. Again, those are the basis of imputation, but there's also not something apart from that that can be identified as a being that self. Other than the aggregates, we can't posit such a self. So here, the thing designated or the thing imputed is not its basis of imputation, but nor can it be imputed or posited outside of that basis of imputation.
Oh yeah, that is so.
No.
Do the way. Do good way. Oh yeah.
So
That is so.
we'll stop there for today as we're out of time.
Oh yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances, May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Love Song's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamdiraya.
Amen.
Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forever.
Thank you for those precious teachings again. Thanks again for your very clear interpretation, Katrina. And for our friends online, we'll see you next Thursday.
Junta Jema Jeonge.
Oh, yeah. Oh, let's go. Yeah.